This is the Cameron Journal Podcast. It's a place where we talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. It's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal Podcast. Today on the Cameron Journal Podcast, I am very happy to welcome a very interesting guest. It's Dr. Alex Kharazi. She is a cardiothoracic surgeon and has written a book about mindset and people navigating high-stakes careers and how to overcome adversity and perseverance. It's a bunch of interviews and other things to talk about how people overcome fear and do something really great and really interesting. So we're going to learn all about what this book is about and how to overcome our fears. So welcome to the Cameron Journal Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Cameron.
Thank you. All right. So, well, first of all, we'll start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote this book.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you nailed it. I'm a practicing cardiothoracic surgeon down in Southern California. I've been in practice for about 4 years now. And this really started as a passion project for me. And it kind of stemmed from, just talking to people like in passing, people I knew, or even people I ran into at work, and kind of seeing, what kind of struggles they were up against and what they were doing to like navigate those struggles. And, I think for me, like personally, I learned a lot from, a handful of those people. And I wanted to share those stories with other people. And that's kind of how the whole project was born. Before it was a book, I kind of called it a project because I didn't really know how to get it out there. And I kind of, conceived of like a few different potential, platforms for it. But then for me, writing has always been like an outlet. So I finally decided to go ahead and write the book.
Yeah. So it's a story collection. What is one of your favorite stories from it? One that really stands out to you?
Uh, that's a hard question because I think that they're all really great stories. I think one of my favorite stories is Laura Fortner's story. And that is, I think, somewhere in the middle of the book. But basically, she's my career coach. And the way I met her was she, is. Kind of offering coaching services to like other physicians. And she described to me when I first met her, her medical malpractice lawsuit. And it was kind of this really difficult time in her life. And for us, the statistics are pretty stark. If you're practicing in like a high risk specialty, the chances of, getting into what involved in a medical malpractice lawsuit in some form are like over 90%. And so Laura talked about how her most, I think, difficult time was when she was involved in a lawsuit like that. And it was, like a $30 million lawsuit or something. And she was on, the losing side of the verdict. And she talked about how she really used that as a positive platform to kind of transform her life. And then that's kind of how she developed her coaching business. And so I thought that was really powerful because it was really kind of taking, what a lot of people would consider to be rock bottom and like many years of kind of dealing with this, and then kind of transforming it into something positive and being able to help and inspire other people.
Yeah. So, and this is something that I've always kind of wondered about. Um, in all the, because I mean they people here only been in practice for 4 years. It takes like 12 years to become a doctor. Like it's a whole long process. Like what
Yeah.
was like how did you navigate like fear and nervousness like the first time you had to surgery someone? Hearts, I imagine, is what you
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah, so I do hearts now, but as you mentioned, it's a long, long process. So I've been in practice for 4 years, but I'm not including the time that, so medical school was, oh geez, I don't even remember now, so long ago, but like 4 years. And then general surgery residency is after that. And you're already a doctor at that point, but you're training in general surgery. And that was another 5 years. And then after that, there's another 2 years of after you're a general surgeon, essentially another 2 years of like subspecialty training. In my case, it was cardiothoracic surgery, and then after that is practice. So it's I honestly don't even remember kind of the very first time, because it's all kind of a gradual process. But I think, more to your point, I think along the way there's certainly those points, right, where you're doing something you haven't done before, and it's uncomfortable. I think anytime, and anybody can relate to this, right? Like anybody, anytime anyone does anything for the first time, or something they haven't done before, it's uncomfortable. But I think the key is to really just really hone the craft and just do it repetitively, many times. But I think sometimes the issue that people have is certainly, especially in medical training, is and depending on the environment that you're in, and if that training is in a good environment or a toxic environment, people's confidence can really be shattered. And I talk about this a little bit in my book, where one of the women that spoke to me that chose to remain anonymous, she's an anesthesiologist now, but she basically was diagnosed. It got to the point where her training was so harsh that from like she took it, well, I think it's not that she just took it that way, but I think it was really a very malignant situation, and she was diagnosed with PTSD by a psychiatrist. So I think there are certainly external factors here.
yeah, and that's, I mean, that's one of the things I was kind of curious about when you talk about, the stress and fears and all this type of thing. Your profession has been through the ringer for 3 years going. And I just like, how have you not broke down crying? I would have broken in like April of 2020. Like a month in, I would have been done. How have you managed to soldier on low these long 3 years?
Well, I think, for us, it was a little bit of a different struggle, right? So, a lot of our elective cases, and operations got shut down, actually. So people were actually not able to even get surgery during that time, when COVID was kind of at its peak. And then eventually that started to lessen. But I think notably, a lot of we had to adjust a lot to what needed to be done. So in our case, or in my case at the very least, there were a lot of people on the ventilator, right? Because
Mhm.
COVID, primarily affected the lungs, among other things, but mainly the lungs, right? So people were on ventilators, and so a lot of them couldn't get off the ventilator, or needed to be weaned over a long period of time. So I ended up doing like over 200 tracheostomies during that time, which for me was, definitely more of that kind of work than ever even anticipated doing. But I think it's just like, you kind of adjust to what needs to be done, and like where in the community am I needed, and wherever that is, that's what you go do.
Well, and that's yes. I mean, I don't I mean, I think that's the absolute 110% right attitude. And that's, I think, the type of attitude, as somebody who is, just, patient around town. I mean, we hope that our doctor has that attitude. So I like you already. But let's but I think but when it comes to like mindset and whatnot, like in terms of like off time, after hours, how have you been able to keep, to kind of keep that going and stay sane in the middle of all of that? Like, what practices, what things are you doing to keep from going nuts?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's fair to say that, like, we all have kind of, good times and kind of harder times, right? I mean, that's
Mm.
just nature, and that's part of the human experience, like whether you're in medicine or not. And it's just, and there's a lot of external factors, and I think that they affect us as doctors, certainly, but I think they affect you no matter what line of work you're in. And the key for me, at least, has been trying to see what I can do, like within myself, to temper some of those factors. And a lot of it was started kind of fueled this personal growth journey that I took to write this book, because I'm always trying to like learn from other people, and like what are these people doing, and these people have been through like really difficult times, or these people do really kind of risky things, and like what are they doing, and how are they managing it? And because I feel like, even I have my own techniques, right? As a surgeon, I think we all do, but I think you can only ever get better by opening your mind, and by like having a growth mindset. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think me I think for me, one of the things that I learned, and one of the themes that I kind of talk about in my book, is really sort of positive visualization, and things like meditation, and sort of really the theme being being okay with external circumstances on the inside, like no matter what they are. So I heard this quote somewhere, I'm not sure who said it, but it's like, true peace is when you can, everything around you can be in chaos, but you can be at peace, like in your heart. And I feel like I probably butchered that quote, like, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's so
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
it's sort of like that's been my goal, is how do I achieve that, right? And especially, I think COVID, a lot of us had like a reckoning, and a lot of us were asking, like, how can I still like find, be happy and be at peace when, even in the world, we didn't really know like how it was going to go for a while, and what was going to happen. And certainly there's so many external factors that play into this, but that's not really like my focus. Like, I know that I'm not discounting them, that as medical professionals and other professionals, we have to deal with that, and there's things that can be done from like like a collective standpoint. But I think my focus was really like starting with myself and seeing like what I can do. And so that's sort of what has kept me, I think, pretty happy, and pretty positive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, what do you do in your off time? Do you have a hobby? Are you hiking, biking, cycling, going to the beach? What do you, in the very little time they let you out of the building, what do you do for fun?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, so I'm in private practice, and I'm very, very busy, and I operate a lot, certainly, but I kind of, I don't feel like I'm particularly, we go to like, my group goes to like 5 different hospitals around town. So I'm not particularly tied to any one spot. So, I can start, like, I don't feel like confined, really, just because there's sort of a freedom in that, I think. So that certainly helps, is I think that kind of practice model for me. I like to
Absolutely.
spend yeah, yeah. I like to spend a lot of time with my daughter. I mean, she's 4 years old. She just turned 4. And honestly, it's just finding what she wants to do, right? And
Oh, that's so
like,
fun. Yeah.
yeah,
And such
super
a
fun.
fun age. Yeah, and such a fun age.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely, definitely. So I also, so the you did a collection of interviews. How did you find all of these people? Where did you get them from?
So yeah, that's a fun question. So the doctors, I think, are, just from my journey in medical school, residency, fellowship, and even into practice, and sort of, they're just sort of things that were notable to be me along the way, or that taught me something, and that I wanted to share with other people because they taught me something. And then the other side, so that was kind of part one, and then part
Mhm.
two was focusing on people in like other high risk, like high pressure careers. And those are people I knew through skydiving. And then there was one girl who, I know very well, and she's like a childhood friend actually, and she is now a stunt driver. So she does things like car commercials and things like that as her like career. So definitely a lot of detail and high pressure, and definitely a lot of risk involved in that. And I thought it was very interesting that that the people in group two were had a much more positive like relationship with fear and risk than like people in the medical profession, I think. So that was just kind of an
Hmm.
observation made. So draw whatever conclusion that, right? But
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think, I mean, let's face it, like a lot of people go into medical because, we used to say, the A students go into the professions, the B students go into management, and the C students will start businesses. And I think a lot of the people who are attracted to medical are obviously people who've done very well in school. They've always gotten good grades, all this type of thing. So I mean, there's a certain personality that I think is attracted to that, and that by its very nature is a personality that ironically doesn't really tolerate risk very well, which is odd because it's like you're also practicing medicine in my mind is terribly risky. Like, it's so but it's kind of odd. I think the person it attracts is a bit risk averse. So I'm not surprised about that, but that's very interesting. That's interesting though, you know.
yeah, and it is a fair point, right? It's there is a certain personality type for sure. But I'm wondering how much of this can be learned? Like that's one of the questions I started asking myself, and that's why I
Mm.
started my sample of people, right? And some of them, like one of the doctors, he's an ER doctor, right? And he spans both worlds. He's a base jumper, and he's in medicine, and so he has a little bit of a like I think different personality, right? Obviously, but most of the people that you see in medicine, yeah. Are very risk averse to begin with, but I wonder if part of growing and part is wanting to change that and wanting to be able to make decisions from not a place of fear or risk aversion, but being able to make decisions from like a place of, like what really is a place of like, I think contentment and peace. And I think that that would actually result in better outcomes, right? I mean, I think it would be very hard to translate that, but certainly it would initiate a culture change, and that can only be good for like our patients and our communities, right?
No, I think it wouldn't. There's a lot of, so I'm autistic and I have ADHD. I also have chronic asthma. And one of I think the frustrations when you're in the chronic diseases world is even just like getting doctors to listen to you, believe you. This is especially acute for women. Um, like when I was growing up, it was so bad one time. The doctor didn't believe my mom about something till and I was like 11, was like, yeah, doc, like mom's not doing so great. And they're kind of like, oh, the boy child has said something. Well, now we'll take her seriously. Like, I think a lot of people get frustrated by their treatment in the medical system. And so I think it's twofold. I think making it easier for you guys to do your jobs and feel good about yourselves brings the human element back into a profession that the insurance companies have assiduously sucked all the humanity out of. And I think everybody would benefit. Patients would believe and get listened to. Doctors would feel better and not be suicidal or develop drug issues or all these types of things that happen. Like the system would be better if we brought that in. So I think that's so valid. So valid.
For sure. And I'm sorry you had that experience. And unfortunately, you're right. It's not uncommon. I hear stuff like that not infrequently. And it's yeah, I think it's all part of, like you said, very appropriately, like it's all just part of like a greater system, right?
Yes.
What can we do to like, fix that a little bit? I mean, it's just one of the different angles we can approach it from,
Yes, and I think that is very much about mindset. So, what of all that you've learned and written about and all this type of thing, what's the one big takeaway you would give to your fellow high achieving professional people?
Um, I think as far as the this is like a difficult question for me because there's so much that I got out of just writing the book and putting the project together. But I think if I were to really answer it honestly, it would be that like anyone can do this. So like I took a collection of these people, these like eight, like take 8 to 12 people, right? And so I took them and I decided to write the stories down. I sat with them like almost as if I was a journalist, even though I've never had any experience in journalism, but I just asked them questions and I learned so much from just talking to them. And some of them I had known for years and I thought I knew everything there was to know about them, right? But I learned something new from every single one of them. So even before the book was written, it had already kind of like achieved its purpose, at least for me, right? Like I'd already gotten so much out of it. Then changed my mindset and gotten techniques and things out of it. But if somebody were to find an interest that they were passionate about, like mine was mindset, motivation, and positivity, basically, like finding a way to bring that into my world. And that's what I studied in the sample size of people around me. But if somebody, any of my peers or anyone were to have an interest themselves, they could do the same thing. Like as a passion project, they could find, a collection of people, 8 to 12 people, and they could interview them. And then they could share those stories. And, it doesn't have to be a book. It could be like TikTok or whatever it. But if you were to do that, or you could do that, Cameron, right? Like, I mean, if you did exactly that, and then you would have a completely different collection of stories surrounding a theme, right? And it would inspire a whole different set of people than like my book inspired, right? Because my book is kind of
I
like,
actually have a nonfiction book coming out this year that does that. Only I'm doing economics, the 2008 recession, and how America millennials have kind of become a lost generation. But that's how I started on Reddit. Is I collected about 40 anonymous stories, and I took them all together, spread them throughout the book, then kind of piled in research and numbers and all this type of thing. So like you kind of have this dual view of like, here's what the data says, not good, and here's the lived experience, also bad. Like so it is a whole but and the things like you learn so much stuff and you get to go kind of dip into other people's lives for 5 minutes and just I
Mhm.
mean and especially like the one that always strikes me is the couple who's like, we have a household income of $120,000, we have 2 kids, we have the house, we quote unquote made it, but it doesn't feel like we made it, and we're one illness or one issue away from losing everything. Like it's super precarious, it's not secure at all. And that was just it just blew me away the first time I read that. I was just like, oh, okay. And I've just kind of been working away at it, and it brings a whole new view, especially to something like what I do, economics and politics and news and all that type of thing, which can get lost in data and numbers, also having the humanity entirely sucked out of it. For me, I think to bring in the human narrative of like, yeah, here's the person who went to law school, passed the bar, couldn't get a job, and ended up back working at Starbucks. Like that's what our economy is doing to people, folks. So
Yeah.
it's quite difficult. So yeah, no, I think it is. I can endorse your method of writing. It has worked for me too.
I love that. By the way, such a fan. I went down this rabbit hole of your millennial stuff on the website the other day, and I am a
Yeah,
fan. And I get what you're saying because as a surgeon, we deal with science and numbers. And so for me, like with my passion project, I was like, I don't want to do any of that. Like if you notice, my book is kind of devoid of a lot of statistics. I think I have like one set of statistics in there. And that's
right.
by design. That's because I wanted to like tell the stories and not focus on data, and I wanted it to be like personal for me. But like how cool would that be if how much more like enriched could we all be if like somebody did like what you did or what I did and just took a passion project and kind of put it out there, right? I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. I think it is cool. For me. I compare what happened to my generation to what happened to young people in Japan in 1991. And so to do that, I've also had to learn about, not that I learned new because I have 2 degrees in political science, but learn more about, but I also had to learn about Japanese culture. I had to learn a lot about Japanese economics. And I also read a lot of stories of how, you know, and especially now in Japan, those people are in their 50s, they're hitting retirement age, government doesn't have enough money. And these people have never really had real jobs, sort of thing. And so but it's fascinating to hear these stories of just like, you know, to kind of get the long-term view of being like yeah, we're probably going to be facing this in 20 years too, because of decisions that got made and all this type of thing. So it's just been such a journey and such an exploration. So it's so important.
That's amazing. Congratulations on your work. I think that's cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, we've reached the part of the show where we do plugs. And so why don't you let people know how they can keep in touch with you and where they can get the book?
Sure. So you can get it on Amazon. So there's a paperback and an e-version. So you can just type in Heart of Fear, Alexandra Kharazi. That's Kharazi. And same thing on Barnes and Noble. And you can kind of get to know more about me through my content. I'm on Instagram, and it's Alexandra Kharazi, again, KHARAZIMD, all one word. And it's so I've got an Instagram account, and on TikTok, I'm Heart of Fear.
Nice. Very nice. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.